Welcome to Pockets of Joy, episode 10. And as I began the season with an author I had admired for years, I am ending with another author I have admired for years. Lucy Pearce, based in Cork, is a multi-passionate creatrix, author, artist, publisher, editor and teacher. Her writing focuses on women's healing through archetypal psychology, embodiment, historical awareness and creativity. You're going to find this really inspiring. We cover everything from our shared neurodivergence to her work, talking about a utopian world where we get rid of capitalism and patriarchy and create a new life for ourselves. Enjoy. So how are you today? How are your energy levels today? Mine are good.
Yeah, no, I'm doing pretty good. I'm just constantly fending off migraines. Like they're just starting all the time and it's just trying to turn it around so it doesn't develop into anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, just living in darkened rooms and
That's so hard. Are they cyclical with your hormones or what? Or was it
they
traveling?
used to be.
Yeah.
They used to be totally, it was premenstrual once a month, 2
Yeah.
days maximum, done since I was 16. And then about 3.5 years ago, I just started getting them. I get up to like 15 days a month of solid in bed, curtains closed, on meds, migraine,
God.
triggering every day. And it's screens that are triggering them, light, any sort of bright light. So too much sunshine. When
Yeah.
I'm driving, if I'm driving at night, if there's, kind of flashing of light through the trees, if there's an ambulance that comes past, if there's something flickering on the TV, any sort of strobe effect, and my phone just does it to me within 10 minutes.
Oh my
So
God. I presume you've tried everything like blue light glasses and all that.
I'll show you how I work at the moment. This is how I normally work.
I
Yeah,
know, I'm
double
similar.
glasses,
Yeah.
and all of my screens are on the absolute dimmest setting,
Yeah.
taking breaks. It's so frustrating because I love to, hit my warmth momentum and go, and I
Yeah.
just so rarely
You
get.
have a huge workload now, don't you, with the publishing house as well as your own books. So how do you manage when you're suffering and you like that need a darkened room? Do you work on through it somehow, or do you just need to shut the world out for those few weeks?
Um, well, it's not those few weeks, like it's been like that for 3.5 years.
Oh,
So I took a year off where I just finished off my own books and did a little bit of illustration, made decisions for Womancraft, but wasn't like doing loads of editing new manuscripts. But really I've just had to go old school. Like I get my husband to print most of the stuff out on paper.
yeah.
So I read submissions on paper, I edit on paper. So that minimizes screen time for me. I lean on my assistant much more heavily.
Mm-hmm.
So, getting her to really kind of shoulder a lot more of the email burden.
That's
Um,
excellent.
Handed over social media for Womancraft completely to somebody else. Lean on my husband far more heavily and just do as much off screen as I can. And then just when I'm on screen, I'm as focused as I can be and really just warmth.
Yeah, get it done really productively.
Yeah.
Good.
So it's frustrating. And then I dictate. So the way I write now is dictating into my phone so that
Yeah.
I'm not having to look at the screen. So I'm doing it with my eyes closed and I'm just talking and then I just edit that down. So that's how I did a lot of Crow Moon, my last book. And it's how I've done a lot of this book.
That's so
Um,
cool. I've discovered that recently too, because I found I wasn't able to type as quick as I was thinking.
mhm.
But then it does annoy me when I go back and I see it's like misheard me and written in the wrong word. And sometimes I forget what was I saying. Do you go
Yeah.
back and edit each paragraph, or do you just dictate for 5 minutes and then go back and check?
Yeah. So I dictate whilst the stream of consciousness is there, whilst the ideas are there. And then, so that could be 5 minutes, it could be 20 minutes. And then I will go back and edit it then so I don't forget, because it puts
Yeah.
in all sorts of weird words. And also I guess I know it quite well now. So I know there's words like neurodivergent, for example, that if I don't pronounce it really clearly, it won't get it. So
Oh,
I know to look at that point to see if it's grabbed it or not.
oh yeah. Yeah, that's good.
So But
It's
it's been a real kind of needing to adapt my working practices.
yeah,
As I said, I love just to get up a head of steam and just run at creativity. And I work very intensively. It's like really interesting that you say whether I have that I have a heavy workload, because there's some days where I'm like, Lucy, this is insane. Like most people are just an author, or they just have one job in a publishing company. You have about 6 or 7 major jobs in the publishing company, as well as being its public face, as well as having your own writing career, which by most people's senses would also be pretty prolific.
yeah,
Um, and and then I've started a podcast, and a lot of people just do a podcast, and I'm like, Lucy, this is nuts. And yet, because of the way I work, I'm like really intensive, do something, and then it's kind of done, and I just step away from it for a bit. So I'm not somebody who like shows up and writes 1,000 words a day.
yeah,
I will write 5,000 words one day, and
yeah.
then I won't write again for 3 weeks.
Uh-huh. Do you think you're autistic with ADHD? Because to me, that would
Yeah.
seem, yeah, me too. I'm that. So, and I've combined ADHD, which was not officially diagnosed, but it was screened for as part of my autism assessment. So she was able to tell me you also have combined ADHD, which was total news to me because I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole. I just thought I was autistic. But I think it's more the autistic brain that can plug away and do 1,000 words a day, and they can show up consistently, I think, from what I've read. Whereas I think it's the ADHD nature to kind of flit and do huge amounts of focus in one area, and then you're done with that. And you know you can leave that for a while and move on to something else.
Mm.
You think
Yeah,
so?
that makes a lot of sense. I saw a couple of memes. My sister's currently on kind of a discovering her own neurodivergence journey at the moment, and she shared a couple of memes the other week about ADHD and autism combined, which just made so much sense to me. So one was, uh, my ADHD mind writes checks that my autistic body mind cannot cash. And I
That's
was like,
so true.
yep.
My God, I'm always, when I'm having like an up day, I'll go to my husband, we should invite people around for a Sunday roast every week. And then
Yeah,
like 2 days later, I can't even boil a pot of pasta for dinner,
yeah,
but I had all these grand ideas of making my own Yorkshire puddings.
yeah.
Oh
So
my
I
God.
now I have my team. So I have my husband. I have one of my very closest friends is my kind of left hand wing woman who runs the office and all our communications, and then Sarah, who's our one of our other main prolific authors who runs our social media, and they are on warning from me that if they hear me make big plans, just to say, that sounds really interesting, Lucy, but just hang on a second.
Oh, I know. But you know what? We need those big plans too, because otherwise you wouldn't have even begun like your publishing house. So you
Yeah.
need that, but obviously we need balance too. Tell
Well,
me,
I need to know that every day isn't going to be like that day where I have the big idea. So,
yeah,
like, in my mind, well, this will only take 5 days because I normally have this energy, but I don't. So
yeah,
it's knowing that, okay, this might be doable, but it's going to take longer than I expect. There will be days when I can't do it at all. And there will be many days where I feel totally overwhelmed by the amount of balls I have in the air. And so, how do I look after myself in those days? And if I still think I can do it with all of that in mind, then go for it. But
yeah,
if not, I just need people at my back who know me, who I trust, who I don't think are saying, I don't think you can do it, because that's not what their job is. Their job is just to be the brake on me, to say, hang on a second, just look bigger picture
yeah.
and just see.
And do you
Um,
find that you get bored with something and you hate having to go back to it to plug away at it? Like, say, a
yep.
book idea that you might have written a huge amount of a book on a whim, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I really can't be bothered fleshing this out. Because I have so many books I have started and stopped because of
Oh,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
I
So how
mean,
do
that's
you,
the kind of the embarrassing thing is that, like, people are always like, oh my God, you've written 12 books. And I'm like, yeah, and there's probably another 12 that have been abandoned, which have got, between 2,000 and 15,000 words there.
yeah. I've got a book sitting there, it's got 90,000 words, and I'm like, I should just put that out there, but it requires so much editing. And I don't think I have the sticking power to go back and edit that. But it's sitting there, and I'm like, that could be out on Kindle now, generating some income.
Yeah,
And I have a whole
I had,
blog. Sorry.
it's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
A lot of, I put together an e-course called Structuring the Soul of Writing, because I just kept getting contacted by women who were in exactly that situation and who had all this writing and didn't know what to do with it. Like they knew it, they wanted it to be a book or they wanted it to be a something, but they didn't know how to move from all of that material that just felt totally overwhelming to being able to put it into a publishable or presentable to a publisher form. So, I mean, that was a that was a course to put together, the amount of information I had to do. And then it's something, editing is something that I do very instinctively. I do what is called, I call it energetic editing. So yes, I'm working with language and grammar, but that's not my main focus. My main focus is creating an energetic container for the book and then making it an energetic and emotional journey through the material, which rather than having it just make sense to the brain or be in a logical, rational order, actually is making sense to the soul, the emotion, so that that's really pulling you through the whole book. So I was trying to teach people how I do that, how to do that, because that's why I think people enjoy my books so much. You know, I wouldn't win any awards for the best grammar or the most rational argument, but I create books, and not only my own ones, but the ones that I edit too, that touch women deeply, that stay with them, that have a big impact on their lives. And the editing process I go through, I think, is a large part of that. You know, you have to have good material to start with.
I think the way you write, well, maybe it's because we're both sharing a neurotype, but it really speaks to me.
Well, that's what I found with my books and the Womancraft books, is they seem to touch women really deeply. They seem to stay with them, to speak to a part of themselves which hasn't previously been articulated or been seen. And so that's what I see my skills as an editor are, is finding some sort of energetic connection between the book and the reader, between the author and the reader. And that is, it's strange, intuitive, unseen work, because yes, you're working through the medium of words, but you're also working on another level too, to constantly be engaging the reader, inviting them further in. And so that's what I tried to teach on that course. You know, it seemed to go pretty well. People seem to enjoy it, but it was a real mission to try and put together, because I do it instinctively. It's okay, so how do I tell somebody else how they can access that in themselves?
Yeah,
But I mean, that's what I love about teaching, and why I just keep coming back to teaching. So I trained as a teacher at Cambridge after I'd done my degree, and that was always my backup plan, was I wanted to do a PhD, but if I needed to make money, then I could be a secondary school teacher, because I love working with people and building skills and really opening up subjects for people. Like, early teenagers aren't my best thing because there's a lot of discipline required, but sixth formers onwards, and you know, I would have loved doing university, except then you're having to teach, you know, kind of theory according to academia, which, you know, again, isn't my thing. I need to be freewheeling and independent in what I'm teaching and how I'm teaching it. But I'm really back to doing a lot of teaching online, which I really love, kind of passing on and exploring creativity together in a way that, you know, a lot of people get really shut down by a shitty art teacher or a parent saying something mean, or just, you know, being creative kind of falls out of favor unless you're really talented in your later teens, and a lot of people just leave it behind then.
Yeah,
And
because
so
they feel like they have to make money from this creativity. And if I can't make it as a musician or an artist, I won't bother even in my spare time. Isn't that the
yeah,
case? Capitalism has a lot to
absolutely.
offer. Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of people really, really have had their confidence in their abilities just absolutely knocked by one bad teacher. And you just see it over and over again. So what I love is having classes which are all different levels, like absolute beginners, people who haven't done stuff since they were at school and who are now in their 60s or 70s, all the way through to people who are working artists or writers, all together, creating together, learning new techniques together. And it's such a lovely environment to do it in, because we don't often work in kind of what you call mixed ability groups, especially with creativity. And yet it's just so lovely to see people building skills, building confidence, learning from each other, as well as, for me as a teacher, just seeing all those levels of skill and ability up leveling all the time.
That is gorgeous. I see you've got a new pattern course happening soon. And I
Oh,
love
I'm looking forward
the
to
idea
that.
of that. I just
Yeah.
know I would probably pay for the course, do the first one, get all excited about it. Then my perfectionistic side would take over. I'd try and fail to do it outside of the class. And then I would probably feel like, oh, I shouldn't continue because I'm no good at this. Or else I would just burn out on it. I would, deep dive into it for a few days, looking at other people's things online, doing loads myself. Like I did at the start of this year, I tried learning to draw portraits from photographs. And I was all excited. I'm going to do one of all the members of my family and they'll be on the walls of my house. And I tried to do like a 30-day portrait challenge. I think I did 5 or 6. And then I think I just got distracted or bored or just too hung up on trying to get it right. So how could I get over that kind of stumbling block?
So one of the things that I do at the very beginning of the course, of all of my courses, but especially Peaceful Pattern, is really just try to encourage students to develop a new relationship with the inner critic, with the perfectionist side. So that's an important piece of the puzzle, because a lot of people have never even learned that they can have a conversation with their inner critic, can
Yeah,
actually
that is to me.
get back right now. And then the way I do it is, so ran Peaceful Patterns last year for the first time, and that we've just put that up, the replay edition, so people can watch the whole thing and do it in their own time. And I'd say there were about 75 women who did it, and they just were so excited in seeing their skills build, because the way I did it was, normally I run weekly classes, and with this it was fortnightly, so that people had enough time to practice, or if they missed a session, that they had enough time to catch up, because it really is a building blocks class. So we're starting really simple and building up and building up. And so in a way you can't rush ahead, because you don't have the techniques, skills that we're learning to rush ahead with. So you can only do the exercises that we've done. So I normally do a warm up, a main exercise, and 1 or 2 extension exercises that you can, if you're an advanced artist, you can go straight to them. If you're not, you can build up your skills over the 2 weeks to see if you can approach doing that final extension exercise. So it's kind of, there's enough stuff for you to be doing by yourself. And there's the Facebook group where people are sharing what they've done and kind of looking for, asking questions, looking for support, insight, help if they're stuck with something. But you can only do that much in the 2 weeks, and then there's the next class. And
I love that. I love the
and
idea
it
of the Facebook group, because I know I'd be so excited about learning this new thing. And usually there's no one in my real life who I could share that with, So
yeah,
that's a great
and
idea to have that community.
for me, creativity and community is just so valuable. And as you say, when we're doing these classes, we're by ourselves and we don't necessarily have anyone in our lives we can share them with. And I know a lot of people, especially during kind of pandemic times and, kind of abortion and gay marriage times, Facebook became a place people didn't want to go, because there was just constant aggro and fights. And so I'm very clear on making my spaces safe, supportive, kindness first. We're not there to debate anything. It's literally just we're working together. We're encouraging and supporting each other as we learn. So this one is, so the first one was called Peaceful Patterns, Sacred Seeds. And so the first part of the class was an exploration of theory. So where these different shapes have been used in spirituality, in art, in culture, and where they're found in nature. So that's really getting your mind off, I've got to be perfect, and into looking and seeing where you can find these in the world, and just the world suddenly opening up to you as you're seeing these patterns and shapes everywhere around you. So I think for neurodivergent minds, that's a really kind of exciting bit, because
so
they're
exciting.
rabbit holes. Yeah.
That reminds me of two things. That reminds me of the Da Vinci Code, where they start seeing these images and symbols everywhere that suddenly mean something. And also, have you seen Disney's Tangled movie?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
where she's lying there in the bed and she suddenly gets the realization, I'm the lost princess. And she sees the sun shape in all the murals that she's been painting forever. I love that idea that, of course, these patterns are archaic, like they've been done since caveman times. And what are we unlocking when we start practicing that kind of a pattern creative art form?
Exactly. It speaks deep to the soul, to the unconscious mind, to the archaic human in us. And then the act of creating these patterns is really mindful. For a lot of neurodivergent people, meditation doesn't really work because we can't sit still long enough to actually do it. We get bored. Whereas this repetitive pattern making, I focus on one shape each lesson, each class. So you can't do it wrong. You just keep practicing it. But you're seeing this larger pattern within the pattern forming and forming. And so it's really absorbing, especially for neurodivergent minds, really calming. Really, if you're struggling with anxiety or depression, is a great thing to do something with your hand, which really helps. Working with our hands when mental health is wobbly has been proven again and again to really support the nervous system. So this is a simple thing that you can focus on, just doing it over and over again, and you get into the flow state so quickly and easily, and you'll suddenly look up and realize an hour is gone, and you're just there creating these patterns, and you're not having to worry about what comes next or what do I have to do, because you've got the seed. I've given you the seed, you've got the matrix, the pattern that you're creating with it, so you don't have to do too much thinking. You're literally just in this lovely mindful zone of working on each shape gently and carefully and watching it unfurl.
I love that.
Just the feedback.
And you don't need any specialist equipment or fancy paints and brushes. It's super simple. I assume you can use a ballpoint pen and an old notebook.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I had, women there was one woman who was really anxious about flying, and she said it's the first flight she's ever had in her life where she wasn't close to a panic attack, because before she got on the plane, she was just drawing patterns the whole time, and it just gave her a focus. People are doing it in doctor's surgeries as they're waiting for appointments. They're doing it in their lunch hours when they're feeling really stressed and overwhelmed from the first half of the day, just to get them into the zone. People were doing it, which is how I tend to do it, after work, after a busy day, TV on or a podcast on, and just doodling whilst you're taking in that audio information and just allowing the nervous system to relax.
That is gorgeous, because so many of us default to sitting on the sofa eating crisps. That would be my default if I'm watching something, because I have to have busy hands. I like eating, I like crunchy things. And that used to be just a nightly thing for me, because I couldn't just sit still and watch something. It feels too passive. So now I've taken up, we're not doing video today, but I'm showing you, I'm doing this cross stitch that I have had about 10 years. It's a printed cross stitch canvas, so it's easy. You don't have to count the stitches, but it's so mindful and relaxing to just pick up and do at different points of the day. And I'm just determined to get it done by the end of the summer. So I'm just kind of battling on through it, but enjoying it every day. I've been reflecting a lot on that recently, because I've been doing a lot of crochet and hand sewing. I do like machine sewing, but I find just setting up the machine and having the space to do it isn't so practical in a busy house. But I was thinking about how much we've lost as a society, and especially for neurodivergent women who in the past, forever in the past, we have been sitting doing tapestries or embroidery. It was always a pastime women did, and now it's kind of fallen out of fashion. And instead we're scrolling on our phones, and that's how our hands are busy. Do you want to talk a bit about that, like about how just with technology and maybe busy lives and women all working now outside the home mostly, how things have changed and how it affects us as neurodivergent women living in this world where we don't have these busy hands and mindful activities, the tangible ones?
It's so well said. I'm not sure I can say it any better than that, but
Okay.
just that I think neurodivergent people tend to have very busy minds.
Yeah.
And when you have busy hands, it helps channel that energy down out of the brain and through the hands, which then calms the nervous system. And you're also getting positive feedback from seeing the thing that you're creating growing and growing, rather than the kind of perseverant, what's the word? The kind of the repetitive thoughts that can often go on loop in our brains, they tend to get freed up once we're working with our hands, because things are in flow, they're not getting stuck, they're not on a loop.
So true. And it's so satisfying, as you say. And it's also you're problem solving constantly, you know, like your thread gets stuck or you're figuring out where does this stitch need to go. So I think it's enough of a challenge, but it's not too much of a challenge. I think it's perfect.
And it takes your focus out of yourself.
Yes.
You know, you're focusing on something beyond your brain, beyond yourself, which I think is very helpful for us. I mean, crochet is my go-to. I spend most of the winter. I have too many blankets, too many scarves, too many hats. I usually go to crochet when the anxiety levels are ramping up. And so I have a very simple blanket pattern, which is literally just a granny square, and you just keep going around the outside of that granny square again and again. So it doesn't require concentration. It's very simple. You can add complexity with adding a different color for each round, or, you know, whatever, but it's simple enough that you really don't have to focus. And if your hands are really shaky and your confidence is really low, it's a really handy one. And then I've got a lovely guy on YouTube called Fiber Spider, who does wonderful crochet hats, and he's so calm and he's so just reassuring and positive and clear. And so I've done all sorts of lovely kind of more complicated, he calls them waffle pattern, and kind of Celtic woven ones, which is fine when I've got into my stride in crochet and I'm feeling more confident and I can focus more. But when I can't, simple granny square blankets. And because it's going out and out and out all the time, I'm not having to sew everything together at the end, because I've made that mistake of having piles of granny squares and then being like,
yeah, I'd never put them all together. I've done a couple of crochet blankets too. I did one in each of my second and third pregnancies. And now the children have them as their special blanket, which is lovely. And you can tell how my anxiety levels were in the one that I did for my second pregnancy. I was still working through that. And it's a small, like your granny square blanket that got bigger, and I made it in rainbow colors. And then for the next one, I was a stay-at-home mom and I was super anxious. I think now looking back, I had prenatal, what is it? Not depression. I wasn't depressed. I was just anxious the whole time. I felt like the hormones of nausea and everything never left me in the second trimester. I was just constantly sick and uncomfortable and very, very anxious. And the blanket I crocheted during that pregnancy fits a double bed. It was just so heavy and cumbersome, but it was like, it was my safety net all through that pregnancy. It really grounded me and it kept me sane in a lot of ways. Oh my God. And they do say that if you're into fiber arts, you're most likely on the spectrum. They do.
I can.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the patterns when you get to know people who are very into crochet or knitting or whatever it might be. They tend to be neurodivergent.
Well, you're working with color and with pattern as well as the repetitive nature of it. And for me, color and pattern are like food. It's like, I can't eat chocolate now because of migraines, but it's like eating chocolate. My brain just lights up and does happy dances all over the place when I have bright color around me or interesting pattern. I come totally alive.
It's like, it's dopamine seeking, isn't it? Yeah, dopamine giving. You should also look into, there's a beautiful Australian lady called Pip Lincoln. I'll link her stuff below. And she does amazingly colorful crochet blankets where I think her background color seems to be more white. And then she does these real pops of bright colors on top of the white. They look fantastic. I've copied a few of her designs in the past as well. Can we talk about neurodivergence? Because I've been thinking of this recently since I saw it on a meme. I can't remember the original meme, but it said something like neurodivergence and neurotypicality, if that's the right word, are all on the one spectrum, but they just decided there was a cutoff point where it began to be called neurodivergence. Because you know the way they say everyone stims, even neurotypical people stim. And stimming, for anyone who's listening, is things like maybe rocking or eating to calm yourself. It's kind of soothing your nervous system by doing something physical, or humming, or it can be repeating something out loud. Do you agree with that, or do you think they're completely separate neurotypes and we're kind of like two different races of humans on the earth? What way do you view neurodivergence?
Good question.
Because I don't know. I think the classifications as they stand, and even the labels and the way they separate autism and ADHD, I think all that in the next 10 or 20 years is going to be absolutely changed, because it seems to me like there's too many people with both for it to be an anomaly, and they're too similar in so many ways. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think, because you were the first person ever who I knew who had said outright, I'm autistic. And I remember reading your posts online, maybe, and you were using the hashtag actually autistic, maybe 10 years ago. And I remember going, wow, okay, what's that? And also thinking, that doesn't, that's not my area. I don't need to look into that because I'm not autistic. And right up to when I got my diagnosis 2 years ago, I was kind of convinced I'm really not. And now the more I learn about it, I see everything I do is part of the autistic and ADHD neurotype. So I think there's still so much ignorance around it, especially in the part of the medical profession. So what's your view on the whole kind of, I don't know. I'd love to just hear what you think about the whole area of neurodivergence.
Okay, so I'll start off with the ADHD stroke autism bit, which is that until 2012, they genuinely thought that the two could not coexist. So they didn't diagnose people with both because they thought you either had one or the other. I was diagnosed in 2017, and I was the last year of Asperger's being in the International Diagnostic Manual. They'd already stopped using it in the US a couple of years before. So when I was diagnosed, I wasn't screened for ADHD because they weren't doing that. But I was seeing an occupational therapist in our local mental health setting and said to her, look, I think this ticks the boxes too for me, and I think this is a piece of the puzzle. And she said, yes, from looking at your diagnostic records and I would agree with you. But because you've got the diagnosis of autism, that shares many boxes with ADHD, so they wouldn't diagnose you with both because you've got the more, in inverted commas, severe diagnosis. So it kind of covers both. Okay. The struggles you have with both are covered by having the diagnosis you have. So that was her feedback for me. So I'm officially diagnosed with Asperger's, but I am self-diagnosed ADHD.
Oh, yeah.
And all the people who I would identify most with, who I feel I have most in common with, all have the double label. People who are just on the spectrum, I feel like I have less in common with. The really intensive drive of ADHD, the strong kind of spontaneity and kind of diving into stuff head first, 2 feet first, really, and a lot of creative energy, and that kind of unstoppableness I really identify with and see in myself and saw in other people who had been diagnosed with both. And I was like, okay, so that seems to tick the other box, because so that's that. the bit about whether I think it's a spectrum that everyone is included on or not. This is really tricky and can be very contentious. I know lots of people say, you know, oh, we're all on the spectrum. And that can be quite kind of like, uh, I would almost say offensive, because you don't get a diagnosis without having years upon years of extreme struggles and challenges to function. And not everybody has that. That's why you get a diagnosis. And so it feels like it demeans that struggle that is our reality, that diagnosis doesn't solve. You know, diagnosis points you in the direction of tools that might work better for you, professionals who might be able to support you. It doesn't get rid of it. You know, you still have the same challenges, you still have the same brain for the rest of your life, you still have the same nervous system. So, but what I've also noticed is that people who tend to say we're all on the spectrum are probably on the spectrum themselves and don't realize it, haven't got there yet. And so I give them the grace of that. You know, there are some people who get very angry and very combative and jump down people's throats, and I don't think that helps anybody. To be a kind of a warrior, kind of slashing everyone out of the way, and that can be a very autistic response, a very black and white need for justice, need for everyone to be really clear that this is this and that is that. So again, I'm empathetic with that as a response, but I don't think it's helpful. What I do, they always say that when a child is diagnosed, a parent is usually diagnosed too. That an awful lot of our generation who would be, I'm about to use a term which again drives some people crazy, but we do need to have ways of talking about levels in inverted commas of autism, because there are some individuals who have 24-hour care needs, who could not live independently, who could not, you know, be married, run a business, and I am not that person. So there are levels of autism, and I don't think it's fair to say that somebody who has a child who is nonverbal, who has extremely high care level needs, is the same as someone like me. I'm not saying that because I am better. I'm saying that because that is true. And I think that's what Asperger's was very helpful for, because it made that big distinction between the whole point of Asperger's was that you did not have any language delays of any sort. So language and communication, whilst you may have struggles with social aspects of communication, language was not an issue. And so I think it helped to delineate somewhat. It also answers the facts as to how people like you and I could get through to our 40s or 30s without being diagnosed, because we weren't seen in the same bracket as what people saw autism as when we were children. When we were children, it was very much a child who was banging their heads against the wall, who could not function in society at all. It was the very, very extreme end of autism, whereas now that is expanding out. And I think that is right and true and proper, because we have a huge amount of struggles that can be categorized similarly as each other, but that and that differentiate us from your average person on the street and how they function. So I think it's really important to have that differentiation, which happens via diagnosis. But so we're all human, we all respond in human ways. So a person whose nervous system is extremely under pressure will stim to calm themselves, will rock, will hum to themselves, will maybe talk to themselves. You know, that's a natural human response to a stressed nervous system. The difference between an autistic person and a non-autistic person is that an autistic person will get into that state quite frequently and will need to build those calming mechanisms into their daily life in order to be able to function, whereas a non-autistic person won't. I saw a very interesting thing once which said that the levels of stress that an autistic person is usually working under are the same levels of stress that a non-autistic person experiences when they go for a job interview.
Yes, I love
That is standard level of stress. Okay, so that's our baseline, and then we're up from there when we have to, for example, go to a doctor or get on an airplane or, you know, meet with somebody who we've never met before. We're ramping up from there.
That's so perfect.
The
And
other,
that explains why we get burnt out so quickly, because we're
yeah,
dealing with that high level of cortisol day in,
yeah,
day out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that is real. Like, that is how our nervous systems are wired. It has been proven again and again that our brains compute the world in different ways. For example, there are tests that have been done that show that an autistic mind sees all the details first. They work from detail up to bigger picture, whereas a non-autistic mind sees the bigger picture first, and then they will begin to hone in on the details. So if you then think about what the brain is doing when it does that, that's a huge amount of information that it is having to compute with every new thing it sees. And it's going to miss bigger pictures because it's so focused in on details. It's not, I don't call that a disordered brain, it's just a differently wired brain.
Yeah. And
So I have an issue.
sorry, it explains why we don't do so well in a group setting, because we're following 6 different people's conversation and facial expressions and trying to read everything and wondering, is there subtext going on? Whereas one-to-one, we can be a lot calmer and just concentrate on what's going on there.
And there are other things in play as well in social settings, so situations. So, for example, the face reading, the eye contact, like, that's known to be a factor for autistic people. That's just known and has been for many, many years. So we are doing that consciously. It's a conscious process, whereas a non-autistic person has learned to do that since they were 2, 1. It's instinctive for them, and they're not using the brain processing power of conscious thinking. It's just naturally happening for them. Then there's things to do with being able to read people's non-verbal communication. We read that very differently. We pick up far more on energetics, on emotions, but we find it far less easy to know what the social kind of unspoken social rules of that situation are.
Yeah.
And then there's things about, I read a really interesting article just this week about the permeability between humans and how non-autistic people have a merge setting where when they're with a group, they merge their awareness and their consciousness into that group very easily and become part of that group. Whereas an autistic person is far more resistant to that, has far stronger individual boundaries, and so doesn't do that automatically. They did it with a virtual reality headset
Yeah.
and a rubber hand, and it's a really interesting thing. And it's how much a autistic or a non-autistic person will identify with that hand as being theirs when they see it being touched by the researchers. So it was very interesting, like proper scientific study about our perception of who we are, what we are, where we finished, where we end. So I those things are all in play. Like, they have been shown and proven. It would be much easier if you could just get a brain scan and they could say, yeah, autistic, not autistic. That would be, and I'm sure in 10 years' time they will get there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, there's a term that I use called neuroadjacent, and I don't know where I got this from. I don't think I made it up, but I can't find it anywhere else. So a neuroadjacent person would be somebody like several of my friends. I put my husband in that category, who wouldn't be neurodivergent in terms of they would get no diagnosis. You know, they're functioning enough to be considered
Regulated.
normative,
Yeah.
but they would be what you'd consider highly sensitive people, and they tend to be people who have at least one child who is neurodivergent and tend to be often partnered with a neurodivergent person and are drawn to neurodivergent people. They tend to have a friendship group that includes a lot of neurodivergent people. So they don't have the degree of challenge by any manner of means that a neurodivergent person has, but there is enough in them that has that kind of that understanding of and connection to draw to neurodivergent people. So in that sense, they would be the people who would often say, aren't we all on the spectrum, because they're kind of there. But I come across in my daily life, and I see on television so many neurotypical people, and I think, yeah, we're not on the same spectrum. Like, you and I we are literally two races of people, and we're humans. We might have the same gender, but after that we have pretty much nothing in common in terms of how we function.
That is
And
so funny you say that, because I look at every single person and character I see, and I see traits of autism or ADHD in everyone, not just my real life circles, which I presume a lot of people in my circles are also neurodivergent, even if they're undiagnosed, because we have, interests in common. But I see people on YouTube, I see characters on TV, and while they may not show the struggles of being neurodivergent, I still see enough traits that I'm finding it really hard to even pick out a celebrity who's not on the spectrum. And I'm watching interviews with celebrities, or maybe I'm just drawn to the neurodivergent ones, and I'm going, yeah, that's ADHD, that's autism. Isn't that funny?
I mean, I think there's a lot that does show up in.
Maybe I'm just in the early stages and I'm just seeing it everywhere, because I know that's a phase you go through after your own diagnosis. You see it everywhere.
Yeah, you kind of order, they call it, which is like gaydar, but order.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter says that I'm forever saying people are autistic, and like, not everyone's autistic, mum. But I just pointed out to her, because she's diagnosed, she doesn't like being public about that diagnosis. And so I just want her to be aware of how many people there are out there. It's not a bad thing to have. And she gets that on one level, but just to see that there are people in all different walks of life doing all different sorts of things who, are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
I think the thing I feel most strongly about is just the terminology of the spectrum. Absolutely great. Disorder, I don't like at all. So I don't say ASD. I don't say autism spectrum disorder. I don't think it's fair to put disorder as part of your identity.
Yeah, I don't like that either. Do you think it's a disability? Do you call yourself disabled? Because I've had a struggle with that, and some days I'd go, absolutely I am, and I want everyone to know it and support me because I need support. And then there's other days I feel like that stigmatizes me and it holds me back, even knowing it myself. So I rather ignore it some days. On my good days, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, disability is a really tricky one. There's a lot of advocacy for it, a lot of education out there around that term, and I think it's very helpful. I think the concept of ableism is a really helpful concept to understand, and I am absolutely disabled by my autism on certain days. I'm also disabled by migraines on a daily basis often. But I don't define myself as disabled. I don't use that as part of my identity, but I am very honest and open about my struggles with anxiety, about my struggles with migraine, about sensory processing, and I'm very open about that. For me, defining myself as disabled doesn't help.
Yeah. I think I feel disabled when I step out my front door, because I'm suddenly in an environment I can't control, and it doesn't meet my sensory needs, and I have to interact with people on a very spontaneous level. Whereas if I'm in my house and if I'm doing my work and if I'm going through my daily motions, I don't feel disabled because I have everything set up to support me. So I would say that it's society, and the capitalist society we're living in, that disables me.
Totally. And that is the current model of disability, is that it is not, the problem is not with the individual, the problem is with the society that is disabling the individual, who may have a variety of different physical or mental health needs which are not being addressed by society. So I think it's a really important framing of the whole concept.
It's like the fish and the monkeys. If you take a fish out of water and ask it to climb a tree, it will suffer and believe it's stupid. Same as if you put a monkey into water and ask it to swim, it won't. And it's the same when I get people talking to me about their children who might be struggling in school or might have dyslexia, and we homeschool. And we've been able to set up our learning for our children and supporting their different needs in the way that suits them best. Whereas a child in the school system will believe it's stupid if it is slower than its peers reading, and that's not right. I have a real issue with that, and the effect that has on your self-talk and your self-belief growing up then after a school experience like that.
And a lot of people don't like all this, because there is an explosion of people getting labels, back in our day, I would have had one dyslexic girl in my class. I had officially not met an autistic person until I was in my 30s. Despite the fact that actually my mother ended up being autistic and I was, and so there is a resistance in some areas to this labeling because it's new, because it seems to be such an explosion and everyone's got a label now. But what I'm very clear about is if you don't have that diagnostic label, you'll be labeled as something else. You'll be labeled as weird. You'll be labeled as slow. You'll be labeled as odd
Lazy.
or a freak, or whatever the slurs that people want to use about your particular issue are. You will be labeled by that as by your peers, and then teachers and parents will find kind of code words which aren't quite as mean, but and you will grow up with that, and that is horrific for self-esteem when you don't understand that your brain functions, your nervous system functions different to those around you, and you just constantly find yourself lacking and everybody else around you finds you lacking, and the frustration from within and without as to why can't you just do this, like what's wrong with you, that just hits you over the head again and again throughout your childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, and it keeps following you. It doesn't stop. So to all of those who say, oh, all these people getting labels, I mean, we get labeled anyway. It's just the labels that we get from diagnosis get us towards help, get us towards support, get us towards having fewer challenges to contend with on a daily basis than are necessary.
That's so true. Where do you think we would be as a society if capitalism and patriarchy never existed? How do you think things would be different for autistic women in particular, or just for humankind? Because I love to think that someday both of those structures might go, even if it takes 100 or 1,000 years, and we might live in very communal, supportive communities without the stress. I'd love to go back to a world where we barter and you can swap your crochet blanket for a basket of eggs and potatoes or whatever from my chickens. I just think that's an idyllic type of setup, and it would get rid of all this stress and pressure that we feel. Do you think so? Do you think that's the problem?
I mean, I think capitalism and patriarchy need to go as quickly as possible. We've just put together, I spent the last few months working on a compendium for Womancraft Publishing of about 80 women's writing called Weaving Our Way Beyond Patriarchy. And just all these different approaches to how we might get there, like literally step by step from now, how we get there, what our visions of there looks like, and how we got here in the first place. And it was so interesting to see all the different perspectives. Some people want woman only government for 10 years after as a transition. Others think that there could be there needs to be protest and strikes and other people it's a far more kind of spiritual thing. Other people that it is something that we can each do in our own kind of practice and how we approach the world. So it's a really big and interesting question. And the reason I got into the work that I do now was because I read a book called, I think it's The First Sex, Elizabeth Gould Davis, and it was written in the 70s, and I'd never really read much feminist literature before. And she was exploring pre-patriarchal cultures and the emergent archaeology that was coming out kind of sharing these, and it just blew my brain open, like, whoa, things didn't always used to be this way, and there was something previous. So that lit my fire, and that fire has not gone out. It gets dimmed every so often when, you know, people like Trump get elected and, you know, that sort of shit. But that's what I'm working for. That's what I'm driving towards. You know, Womancraft is very much set up as a company that is trying to walk its talk. You know, we're here in capitalist patriarchy, but how do we move beyond that? How do we work in partnership, creative partnership, financial partnership with other people, not being funded by loans or large kind of inputs of capital from external sources, supporting charities and organizations that are doing the work that we support. You know, so we're really trying to live it. I'm trying to live that on a daily basis. But it can feel really dispiriting when you look at the news and you think, God, how many more death throes of patriarchy do we need? How much more horrible does it have to get? Because it kind of seems to reach a crescendo and you think, okay, things are going to start getting better now. And then they get even worse. So I find that hard to navigate, just intellectually and emotionally, that feeling of, you know, I'm a utopian at heart. I wrote my dissertation at university, utopianism in the US. And there are times when that has broken in me, that feeling of hope, that feeling of there can be something better. And the other thing I think really complicates the picture is technology. You know, your idea of bartering eggs for whatever you call, we've got AI now. You know, we're all reliant on technology to make our culture function. So either we drop back to a very different level of existence, which a lot of people would find really shocking. A lot of people would not be skilled up to be able to, you know, grow vegetables, raise chickens, or live such a simple life. You know, we're used to being really distracted all the time. We're used to being able to connect and communicate through, you know, through the internet, through flights. If all of that fell, like, there's going to be an awful lot of people who can't function, an awful lot of businesses that can't function on any
I would
level.
say good. I'd be like, great, let us show you the way. And me and all the cottage core homeschooling moms would come out of the woodwork and be like, this is how we need to do it. I would love to see all that disappear overnight and people have to just rely on their hearts to get through rather than their brains and their wallets. I
don't know, it would be a huge shock to the system for a lot of people. And we have AI in the mix now, where we are not really in control of where the next step goes. If, you know, the warning flares have been sent up last year where they said we need to take a 6-month break on the development of AI because it's moving too fast now.
And did they?
I don't know if they did, but like the leading people in it was saying this is going too fast.
Yeah.
I don't think they did, but they sent up that flare. So my sense is yeah. I'm very glad that I get to live to witness these next few decades. I think it is going to be different to what any of us can have anticipated, can predict. Yeah, I think we're going to see change beyond at the pace of which no human has ever seen change, and there's going to be a lot of adapting.
In a good way, are you saying this, or are you scaring me now thinking that there's bad stuff coming, like the movie I, Robot that came out in the 90s where robots took over the world, I think?
I think both. I think it is just going to be totally and utterly different.
Wow.
I mean, you know, we're connected to, just on one level, we're connected to change in terms of, we've got a child that's type 1 diabetic, and he was diagnosed 9 years ago. And the advances in technology between what he first started using in order to control his diabetes, which had been standard for 50 years, to now he has what is called an artificial pancreas, which is a sensor on his arm which communicates directly to an insulin pump on his belt, and he doesn't have to do anything except let it know what he's eaten. And that is now standard. and that's in 9 years. I'd say in another 5 years, it's probably going to be implanted into him in some way. And
Yeah.
it will be able to know what he's eaten as well. You know, that sort of technology, that is keeping him alive minute by minute, day by day. And that's just for one form of medical care.
Yeah. And nobody would deny that that is super necessary and amazing advance in technology that we would never want to go back on.
And it's happening so fast.
Maybe that's the benefit
development
of all the other crap that's coming in. Maybe it's all going to come up together and we'll have the good with the bad and we'll just have to navigate a new world.
Going to be very, very different.
I don't see how we can stop it. I spoke to the writer Ben Murnane, I think it was episode 4 of the podcast, about the idea of transhumanism, because he's just done a biography of Zoltan Istvan, who's an American. He was a presidential candidate, and he believes that living forever is a possibility in our lifetimes, that somehow either medical advances or some kind of technology will enable somebody to somehow live forever in whatever form that might be. And we also got on to talking about AI, and Ben is a writer who writes articles and travel books and things. And he has said without AI, he wouldn't be a writer because he needs it to begin generating an article. He'll use AI for prompts and then he'll write from that. Whereas for me, I'm shocked by that, because I'm thinking I would just sit and start doing my research. But he's saying, like, these tools are here. We used to consult the library encyclopedias for our research. Now we consult Google and AI, and that's just the new way of doing things. And it's not going to go back. It's going to help us. He thinks it's going to open up this new world of creativity.
It already is.
Yeah. Do you...
you find me an author who hasn't used Google to do their research, to find books, to find sources, to find articles in the last 10 years, and I'll find you someone who's living under a stone. Like, everybody is using Google, which is, got AI woven all the way through it to find information. That's how we find, like, you and I wouldn't be talking to each other because I'm not going to come up to Dublin to do an interview. So, like, but
that's different to like ChatGPT, where it can actually write the words for you. So where do we draw the line? Do we draw the line at the generative AI? Do you think?
I don't know. It's not something that I personally use, and yet I am using it in terms of, we started the conversation, so we've come full circle. I now dictate my books and they become transcribed into words. That's AI doing that.
Yeah, true. And then I suppose
it's not writing it for me.
Yeah.
But it is a technology that 5 years ago you had to pay $300, $500 for a thing to work on your laptop, and then you had to be able to train it up over several years. I know, because I did it. So, like, now everyone has got access to that thing on their phone for free.
Yeah. And I suppose it's good because it means people who can't physically type can now dictate a book and be an author. So it is great.
Autistic people who find people stuff really hard can have all sorts of creative careers now, because they can do it thanks to the internet. They can do it thanks to Zoom calls and online sales and all of that. So, like, it is opening up an incredible vista of possibilities, and there are going to be downsides too. And we don't know what they are. We cannot, people have tried predicting through sci-fi, through film, and obviously researchers in an area and stuff, but we can't fully know what all the goods and all the bads of anything will be. We just have to do the human thing of try it and see.
Yeah. Which is good and bad at the same time. Scary.
Yep. Welcome to being human.
Come here, we haven't even gotten on to like womanhood and Moontime, your book, which made the biggest impression on me. And I would recommend to everyone listening, if you menstruate or if you know someone who menstruates, this is a book that you need to read. And the sister book to that, Reaching for the Moon, is fantastic for girls approaching menstruation as well, or who've just, in their teens, who want to see another side to it rather than just the biology of what's going on in your body. So I want to thank you for writing those books, because they have literally shifted from where I used to be very scientific, looking at my cycle every month and tracking my ovulation for natural family planning. It became a huge spiritual thing for me, and it's helped shape how I'm now navigating menopause. Have you a menopause specific book that I need to read? Actually, I haven't asked you that before. No.
No, we have one of our authors working on one, and she's just had to take a couple of years, kind of step back to deal with other stuff, but I'm hoping that that will emerge in the next couple of years from Womancraft.
Great.
I'm only perimenopausal. I'm not in a position to write one myself, but what I will say is, again, this is a field that is changing so fast. When I wrote Moontime 12, 13 years ago, it was the only book that I found that was bridged the mainstream medical model of menstruation and the alternative spiritual model of menstruation. And I mean, that's why it hit #1 on Amazon kind of for so much of its first few years, because there was nothing else out there like it.
Yeah.
Whereas now, you know, and people didn't talk about menstruation, whereas now, you know, the Guardian will run, you know, an article every couple of months on, you know, menstrual leave becoming law in Spain and Korea and in various different companies, and, you know, Wimbledon changing just last year, changing the thing so that women could wear dark underwear underneath their skirts for if they're menstruating, so that it doesn't come through. You've got, you know, when I was writing Moontime, blue blood was the thing on adverts. Now it's red blood on pads. You've got, you know, Davina McCall doing her big series on the menopause. I mean, the menopause wasn't really being spoken about, and now it's mainstream. There's so many books on menopause and perimenopause in the last 5 years. So it's gone from a field that nobody would touch to something that is becoming more and more mainstream, which is just fabulous. I mean, you know, when I was writing it, charting your cycle was, you know, very few people were doing it. And now, you know, my girls have just got charting apps on their phones, which were recommended by their friends. It's completely mainstream.
It's amazing.
So I'm not saying I had much to do with that, but I'm saying that that is how fast things have changed in that field.
And when
And
you
so
think when
Moontime,
we were in school, we couldn't even tell our friends we were menstruating. It was all hush hush. You
yeah,
snuck your sanitary pad to the toilet in your pocket. And if you brought your school bag with you into the toilet cubicle, that meant everyone would know you were having a period. And you unwrapped it so it wouldn't crinkle and rustle.
I used to cough so that you couldn't hear the, yeah,
There was so
yeah,
much shame around it. It's amazing to think how far we've come, and
yeah.
how, especially if it starts to affect in a good way the world of work and the 9 to 5. If women are able to take menstrual leave, that's the first I've heard of it, and I'm delighted, because that's only normal. I only read last night that menstrual cramps are akin to the pain you feel during a heart attack. So suddenly this
Jesus.
research is out here, and we're suddenly seeing male researchers going, wow, you guys have actually been hurting all this time. And now we're like, okay, are we allowed now ask for time off?
Yeah.
You
And
know,
endometriosis is another big thing that was completely hush hush until about probably 4 years ago. And then several high profile women, business women, politicians started speaking about it, brought it up in the House of Commons in the UK. And, you know, really, these things have been totally dismissed and ignored by medical science as not really very important, when actually you've got a large percentage of the population dealing with it on a monthly basis. And the second you start explaining that in terms of economic cost, in terms of how many women are actually missing work, same with migraine, suddenly it becomes something that, oh, actually, we do need to pay attention to this, rather than it just being a woman's. Because like with migraine is I think is the second most common disabling condition, and 1 in 4 of the people who suffer with that are men. The rest are women. So
yeah,
it's been discounted as, because when you're struggling with migraine, you're invisible, you're in bed, you're in a dark room, you're not presenting in hospital, you know, you're not having stuff done to you, you're just suffering in the domestic sphere.
it's horrendous. I've had a period of migraines through a hormonal shift. Obviously, I had them on and off for about a year, and it's completely debilitating. Your vision goes, you can't drive, you can't eat, you can't care for your family. You're literally disabled by it, you know, for days on end. It's horrendous.
Yeah.
And stress is a factor in that, and stress causes hormonal imbalance. So if women are stressed in the workplace, they're going to suffer, and they're going to leave work, and it'll be a productivity problem.
And again, we have the full circle thing that neurodivergent people are far more likely to suffer from migraine as well. They go hand in.
Yeah, of course. And there's a statistic that I read that says 40% of women leave the workforce in their 40s. And it's because our hormonal changes make working impossible, working in the 9 to 5 capitalist setup that we're all part of.
And yet, if you ask those women if they want to work, I guarantee the answer for most of them would be yes. Maybe not the job that they had or whatever, but they're not wanting to not work. It's that they can't. They can't make it happen.
Exactly. So change has to happen. And I think that's a case where it's not going to come from the male management. It's going to come from the women at ground level saying, I need time off. I need paid time off, or I need a 4-day week or a 3-day week, or I need to work from home a week every month, or whatever it is. And they need to ask for it themselves. But unfortunately, we've been so conditioned to kowtow to the male setup where they have a 24-hour hormonal cycle and we have a 28-day hormonal cycle. We are not going to find that easy, and there's going to be huge pushback. And I'm so glad in a way that I've never been part of it. I remember in my 20s looking at career options and thinking there is no hierarchy, there's no workforce I want to be part of that I know I can show up every day of the month. I just knew instinctively I was not going to be able to do a 9 to 5 in an office setting. So I've always made choices outside of it. I could not have functioned and thrived in a 9 to 5. I'm sure you were the same. I'm sure you had those instincts.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the job that I do for somebody else. I can do it because I'm so flexible that, you know, I can work when I'm well. So I might do a full day, 8 till 6, not a bother. And then there'll be 3 days where I'm literally doing an hour here or there. And then, you know, one day I can't do the morning, I'll do all afternoon. Another day, you know, I can't do that week and I'll do something at the weekend. You know, I have the work that I have and I can get it done, but I can only get it done on my terms around my nervous system and my body. I couldn't show up 9 to 5 and promise that I would be there 5 days a week. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I just found a statistic from the Office of National Statistics, UK. So I love a statistic. Just 22% of autistic adults are in any kind of employment. That says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I actually heard something about 10% of autistic people are in employment, but I think now that more people are being diagnosed and there's autism with ADHD, which kind of tempers the autism in many ways, I think that probably takes that into account. But yeah, it's staggering, and you can really see it in the people I know who are struggling in the workforce, who are undiagnosed. It's a very real issue. And it's a great thing that there are so many more diagnoses happening. And I hope that now, I think it was up to about 40% of people are known to be on the spectrum. So it used to be like 10% of people they knew were neurodivergent.
Oh, not even, it was one in 124, I think it was.
There you go.
And that was about 15 years ago. That's what it was thought. And then it came down to 1 in 64, and then it was 1 in 30. But still, it was 4 times more men than women. And now they're saying, actually, we think it's about even numbers, men and women.
Yeah, there you go. It's amazing how quickly that's changing. Yeah. So listen, will we finish up? Maybe we'll just do a couple of the questions I ask everyone. I would actually love to know, was there a book or movie that made a big impression on you, say growing up, that kind of shaped things for you?
There were 2 that I can really see impact. I kind of feel them in my creative soul every time I create, and what I was drawn to. There's one called The Rainbow Man, which was some kind of new age thing with this rainbow guy with he was kind of spiritual with kind of rainbow eyes. And I just see him, I've always loved rainbow colors. And it was what I'd most seen that just reflected that love of color, and it comes through in my art too. And I remember The Rainbow Man. And then The Worst Witch by Jill someone, and just that feeling of trying really hard and never quite fitting in, and everyone being a bit mean to you, and getting the shitty cat that won't stand on the end of your broomstick. And like, they were really mainstream books, The Worst Witch, and they've made them into a great series when my kids were younger too, so I got to watch them. But I really, you know, I wasn't brought up witchy, but the witchy stuff, the magicy stuff was there from early. And so yeah, those 2 really
I love that. The worst, I haven't heard of The Rainbow Man, but The Worst Witch has been on repeat here with the books and the TV series with my daughter. She loves it. She's really drawn to it. And
And I
there's,
feel like my cat that I have now, he's a tabby cat. I only get tabby cats. And I have a feeling that my tabby cat would be the cat that couldn't sit on the end of the broom. He's he's his own wacky self. And yeah, so
oh,
I got.
that's gorgeous. I love that. Okay, finally, do you have a motto for life? Let's just end with this one.
So I've appropriated it from Theodore Roosevelt, and it is do what you can with what you have where you are.
Oh, I love that.
And it just works wherever you are, in whatever situation you are. It's what can I do now with what is here right now in the situation I find myself right now? What is the one thing I can do? So it's not pie in the sky. It's not, when everything feels overwhelming, I can get into I can't, I'm scared, I can't do anything. And actually, no, there's always something you can do. And that something might be get out of bed and go to the toilet, or it might be have a glass of water, or it might be pick up the phone and call the doctor. But there's always something, or it might be call for help, or it might be write down that thought you've got in your brain, because that's that could go somewhere. Whatever, wherever you are, whatever situation you're in, you can do something.
I love that. That's so empowering. And it's also like you don't need to go buy a load of materials to do a new craft. I was dying.
And that's crucial.
Yeah.
It's crucial for, so often if you're a perfectionist, you can set up really high standards for yourself and say, I can't do this until da 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 da. I can't do this until I'm 40. I can't do this until I've made 10,000 euro this month. I can't do this until I have these exact paints. No, bollocks. You can do something right now with what you have. So start now.
That is a perfect place to end. And your books have all that same kind of message of positivity through them as well. I love your books. Most recently, I bought She of the Sea, and I've been reading that on my Kindle, and it's beautiful to see the images there as well. I love your books in print and online, and also your mailing list gives you the most beautiful. I had such a beautiful reaction to that. I know you were delighted.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I shared that. You give so much. What's that called? That little package that you get?
It's called the Care Package. That's for Womancraft Publishing, if you sign up there. So we put together a care package during the pandemic when we were feeling really despondent and not sure how the world was going to go, what direction we were going in, and really helpless. And everybody else was really panicking. We thought, what can we do now where we are? And what we could do is we had a whole field of writers, a whole bunch of inspiring books. So we took quotes from them and created a beautiful ebook, and then lots of resources. We invited our authors to create a resource to share too. And so we've left that as the thing to give people, to welcome them, to show them who we are, what we offer, and what we do. And yeah, it's just that's how we roll. We are generous as we possibly can be in sharing resources that will inspire and support people.
It's beautiful. So people can get that if they sign up to Womancraft Publishing, is it?
Yep.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I'm going to put all your links below for people, Lucy. And thank you for being so generous with your time and your wisdom today. I've absolutely loved speaking to you. I wish we had another hour and a half to do it.
Well, it's been great because I don't know if you're going to say this in the intro, but you and I were part of a blogging mums group, like right back in the beginning of blogging, and have stayed in contact ever since. And it's just, it's lovely to finally, we've never had a conversation, so it's lovely to finally actually talk.
And someday I hope to give you a hug in real life, because you are just so warm and wonderful, and that comes across, and that love and respect you have for women comes across in all your work. It's just beautiful to see someone who's doing this in the world on a bigger scale than just the little personal blogger. You've made it into a whole little industry, and I love it. Thank you so much, Lucy. Have a gorgeous day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, what an end to season 1. Thank you so much to everybody for listening. Please check the show notes to follow Lucy and her work below. Guys, I'm just loving this. The podcast is going from strength to strength and getting amazing feedback. I'm actually starting season 2 next Tuesday. I'm going straight through because I don't want to stop. I have so many great guests lined up for you. And please get in touch if you've got any suggestions for guests in future episodes as well. All feedback is welcome. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you next week.